pretense that this ripoff wasn't happening. So people are bitter and they're angry and they're looking for somebody to help them. But the center, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, they're not going to help them. This is politics as usual. You're captured by your donors, the big corporations. And so when a bitter, angry man comes along and expresses some of the rage they all feel, Mr. Donald Trump, they go for him because not that he's attractive and not that he's going to solve a problem, but at least he sounds better than those other robots that didn't give you anything but bullshit most of the time, if you pardon my Spanish. Okay, and now some of them go over the edge and they go to Washington and they do crazy crap at the Capitol because they don't know where to take their anger. Voting for Mr. Trump got them exactly nothing. Fakery. They were told to take their anger and turn it against immigrants, poor people from Central America, or to take it against the Chinese, as if it were the Chinese that brought those companies and jobs over there rather than American corporations making more money by going to China. It's been a hustle all the way through, and I think we're seeing the end game now of a system that has impoverished people it promised to give a middle-class life to, and it doesn't know how to get out of the hole it has dug itself into.
So I think one of the problems is that a lot of regular people, working people, think that capitalism occurred spontaneously in nature, and they don't. They think it was like, well, if you're for capitalism, you're for Jesus, because Jesus rewards hard work and responsibility, and socialism rewards laziness. And so that's of the devil, and capitalism is of Jesus Christ. This is what people literally think. You know that's what people think. I don't have to tell you that, right? That's what we've been told. Capitalism equals democracy. That's what we also. This is all propaganda from capitalists. None of this is true. And so people can't even envision a world where they have control over their own life economically. They can't. They lack the imagination to even imagine a world in where the government provides health care to them in the middle of a pandemic. Like, they can't even imagine it, and they see no one fighting for them in government. No one fighting for them, doing nothing. Even people like AOC and the Squad just rolled over for them once again and elected Nancy Pelosi Speaker without extracting anything and going against their own campaign promises of forcing a vote for health care, Medicare for all on the floor. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do anything. So that we're left with no one fighting for us. And this is what's going to cause social unrest. And if it doesn't, we're going to just slip into being like Brazil. So right now, during this crisis, the government is decimating 1/3 of the economy as a matter of policy. And they're closing down gyms and local businesses and restaurants and hair salons but they're not doing that to Amazon or Best Buy or Walmart or Target. And so the money is being funneled upward. It's going away from the communities and it's being funneled up. So that's what we talk about as a transfer of wealth upward. So the money is no longer, for instance, in Los Angeles, Pavilion, one of the grocery store chains, just fired all their union delivery people, and they replaced them with DoorDash. Now, DoorDash is an app that's out of Silicon Valley, so every time someone uses that app, the money, instead of going to a union worker and staying in their community, is now being funneled up to somebody in another state or another city somewhere, a big corporation. So that's how you transfer wealth upward. So now every time someone in Los Angeles uses that DoorDash, what they're doing is bankrupting their own community and sending that money out of their community. And people don't realize that these are policy choices that politicians are making. And they're making these choices to fuck you and screw you economically while funneling that money upward to their donor class, which is why we saw in Los Angeles during the pandemic, when restaurants were told to lock down, movie companies were able to set up outside restaurants right across the street from restaurants and serve 100 people working on a movie production, because that movie production is a donor to Gavin Newsom and all the politicians, and the bank that is financing that movie is a donor to Gavin Newsom and all the politicians. So that people see what's happening, but they just can't imagine a better world. How do we turn this crisis, which is an existential crisis, which is why I've been screaming about it since the CARES Act, This is an existential crisis. How do we turn this into a moment for the workers to rise up and take power again?
Well, the best answer I can give is the following. If you look at the 4 years of Mr. Trump, here's what I think you get. There were 3 things that he accomplished, and every one of them is an opportunity for a left, if it understands itself, to take advantage of. Number 1, he gave the richest businesses in America the biggest tax cut they have had in a long time at a time when they didn't need it. Number 2, he deregulated the little bit of regulation there was to give them profits in yet another way because they could disregard labor protections or environmental protections or all the rest. That's what he had his cabinet do. And then as people's situation deteriorated, because he didn't do anything to help anybody. You know, he promised to bring manufacturing back. It didn't happen. He promised to change. The government wouldn't be in a deficit. That didn't happen. All the things he didn't happen.
He's going to drain the swamp. He was going to drain the swamp and give everybody health care. Right. He didn't do any of that stuff.
Right. And so people got angrier and angrier. So then comes the third thing he did. He worked very good for the ruling class of this country by deflecting the anger that his own policies made worse by teaching them to hate immigrants, to hate the Chinese, to blame foreigners are cheating us like we are dummies and the Mexicans took advantage of us and the Canadians. I mean, unspeakable junk was coming out of his mouth, but he knew he had to deflect that anger somewhere. You need a left that does demonstrate in word and deed how it is going to really solve the problem. And let me be very concrete. Number 1, and by the way, I don't expect the Biden administration to do this, but I think it's self-destructive for them if they don't. Number 1, you immediately do what we did in the 1930s. You take the 26 million people now unemployed and you immediately hire them. The federal government hires them. And you know what we do with them? They will test everybody finally for this damn virus. And they will provide masks. And they will make it possible for our children to go back to school because they'll have 1 teacher for every 4 students. So they'll have social distancing and they will continue the education, which for the majority of kids is now at best working half time in what it should be. So, and they can green America and they can take care of elderly people. They can do the things we need and they will have a job and an income. That Mr. Trump didn't do. And if a new Democrat came in and did it, oh boy, would that change the conversation in a hurry. Just like it did when Roosevelt did exactly that in the 1930s.
So
Number two, besides the unemployment, solving that right away, no such thing as homelessness. In this country, we have the homeless people sitting across the street looking at the empty apartments and the empty houses. There is no excuse, no morality, no ethics, no religion sanctifies such behavior. And put those people into a home, find the homes and put them in there, help them get it. And number 3, develop a whole network of industries in this country where the enterprise is run democratically by the workers in it. So they decide together who gets paid how much money. None of this Jeffrey Bezos with $200 billion while tens of thousands, millions of workers have enough money, give their kid a college education if they can afford it, to overcome their so-called quote, food insecurity, because we have these nice terms that cover for things like hunger. Okay. These could be done, and they could be done in the first 100 days of a new administration, and it would rewrite the politics of America. Here's my fear. If they don't do that, if they fiddle around the edges the way democratic regimes have been doing for decades, they are going to enable the next Trump to come in and make fun of them. They didn't solve your problem. I'm another rider in there on the big white horse. Vote for me. It's tragic. It's tragic. You know, the old joke, if we don't learn from the history we've just gone through, we will repeat it, only it'll be worse next time.
So how do we? So it's obvious that we need a jobs program, just like you said, and just like FDR did when he became president. How does there is no left in America? I keep trying to tell people we just lived through the biggest the DSA has almost 100,000 members. We just had a hashtag Force the Moment happen that comes out of their own manifesto, and they passed. So there is no left in America. There isn't a left organization that's doing fucking anything because they've been decimated, like you said, after World War II. They got rid of with McCarthyism. They got rid of the communists. They got rid of the socialists. And now the people who consider themselves left, I think, are all controlled opposition. They're just funneling all this rage and energy. Bernie Sanders and the DSA are funneling back into a corporate pro-war party that is fucking us and denying us health care in the middle of a pandemic, and all the while focusing all your rage on Donald Trump instead of the system that gave us Donald Trump. So how do we make Joe Biden? What power? Because there is no left organization that's worth a shit in America. Hashtag Force the Vote prove that. And half the independent media is also shit. That hashtag Force the Vote prove that. How do we force a Democrat, Joe Biden, to do something to avoid getting another worse Trump? How do we make him give us a job program?
Well, I think the only answer is already present in the way you've posed it, Jimmy. We have to build, I know this is frustrating, but we have to build the left. Let me remind you, in the 30s, it wasn't Roosevelt who gave us the New Deal. It was the CIO, the two socialist parties, and the Communist Party working together. Even though they had their fights and their disagreements, they worked together, and they basically said to Franklin Roosevelt, and this is so important to understand. They went to him and they said to him, if you help us, you create Social Security, unemployment compensation, a minimum wage, and a government jobs program. If you do that, we will make you a hero, and you will be president, as he became 3 times in a row. You will be the most popular politician this country ever had. But here's the other theme that people don't want to remember. They also told him that if you don't do it, you won't be dog catcher anymore.
Right.
You'll lose the next election because we won't vote for you. And Mr. Roosevelt was no stupid person. He understood. He was a smart politician. He knew exactly what he had to do. And he went back to the business community. After all, he was a Roosevelt. He came from that community. He knew them all. He went back to them and he said, this is the deal. If we give the mass of people a Social Security, an unemployment, a minimum wage, and government jobs, this system will survive. If we don't, they're going to make a revolution, and you fellas, you risk losing everything. Now, the lesson here, we have to have an organized left willing to make that kind of demand, organized so that demand is credible. You have to help us, or else we won't go with you. Business as usual simply won't cut it anymore. That's our job.
So, Professor, I hear what you're saying. There is no left in America making a demand of anybody. Even the organization, the Justice Democrats, are not asking their justice elected officials to do a goddamn thing. I just tried to get them to do what they fucking ran on, and half the left turned on me because they said my tone was too offensive to the politicians I was pressuring. There is no left, Richard. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know how we organize the left. I just tried to, and half the left came after me personally for actually trying to get a vote on hashtag Force the Vote, which every person runs on. And Nancy Pelosi ran on in 1994. So there is no left. I mean, there just isn't. I don't know. What institutions are you talking about when you say we have to organize the left? Who the fuck are they?
Well, I think, Jimmy, the only thing I would perhaps disagree with, I think there is a left. I think it's big. I think it's strong, but it is terribly disorganized. It doesn't understand organization. You know, for 70 years of the Cold War, 1945, basically to now, this America has been a place more than any other place on earth